Namaste and welcome to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, our network is in its 16th year and listened to in over 30 countries. I would like to personally thank you for giving me the gift of your time. As always, it is my honor to hold space with you. And so today we are going to talk about turning our focus inwards, which is a lot about, I say it at the beginning of all of my yoga grounding meditations. Whenever I'm starting a new class or with a new client, that is how we begin to kind of check out from outside the yoga room to inside the yoga room. And so even for myself, that kind of idea of, leave it at the door. Actually have a little sign that a friend gave to me with a little Hindu Buddha on it, and it says, "Let that ish go." So that's by the front door of my yoga studio. And, it's important to remember that while we're constantly in the state of leaking energy or, directing energy outward, whether you are setting intentions, whether you're manifesting, whether you are working, whether you are studying, whether you are, helping out a friend, running errands, whatever it is, it's this constant external drive, push, outwards energy, masculine, etc. And a lot of times I think we forgot how important it is to turn inwards. And that's one of the huge things that yoga deals with, is turning your focus inwards and hearing, listening, and being with yourself as you are in this moment. So what I'd like to do, and I'm going to touch on a few asanas that, one of which is, one of the goal asanas, right? And can be, I'm going to say, a little bit dangerous. So I'm going to speak about it from this kind of theory place, from that aspect, and advise everyone, big disclaimer right now, not to force yourself into this pose. And one of the reasons for that is because it's the traditional lotus pose, Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, right? It is ankles, I will say ankles, and feet tucked into the upper hip creases and crossing. So at the shin bones, I should say. So lotus pose is, it's a beautiful pose. It is the traditional Eastern yogic meditation seat. A lot of times it's practiced with a little pillow or a bolster or something to get the hips again above the ankles. But the reason that we're talking about directing energy inwards, and I'm using these poses from my own experience with yoga, and the idea of, they're not all going to be as I'll say aggressive, even though it's not an aggressive pose, but it is definitely not a pose that everyone can access easily. And you can definitely hurt yourself if you force yourself into it. So what will happen is, generally speaking, if you have the flexibility to get into it, a lot of times what will happen is you'll start to stretch into the ligaments of the ankles, because you roll at the ankle when you're trying to wedge it up into the hip crease. So I don't like to see that. And there are lots of prep poses to come into half lotus. There are prep poses. Hip openers pigeon is a prep pose for full lotus. So there are lots of ways to get in there, but the point of bringing this up as the starting point, we'll work our way backwards to the more accessible versions of postures that you can access to turn energy inwards towards yourself. Lotus, ironically enough, the reason that I chose it as kind of our jumping off point for this conversation is because you're literally taking the energy, the grounding energy that connects you with Mother Earth from the soles of your feet. You're literally putting them into essentially the base of your chakras, right? Up by your hip creases, by your first and second chakra. So it's this idea, and, traditionally, the hands are palm facing up in the yoga mudra with the index finger touching the thumb, and the middle ring and pinkies open in this receptive energy, with the hands gently balanced on the thighs or knees. So this can also be a really gnarly pose for anybody with any knee injuries, let alone anyone with a lot of hip tension or hip replacement, God forbid. So just, again, I'm not, this is another disclaimer. I'm not telling you to pop into lotus pose. I'm saying that I'm using this as the case in point of why it's important to take energy inwards and direct it towards us. And as this is kind of the epitome of the meditation seat, it's important to start there. So while in that idea of, ascended masters, sitting in this seat, attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, or whatever you ascribe to, um, this idea of being in complete and total stillness, and that yes, your energy is then connected with the divine in theory, or your higher self, whatever you want to call it, by being in that meditative state. But that the idea is to, I don't want to say block out the world around you, because that's not in essence what meditation is, but regardless of the world around you, you are able to be completely in tune and at peace with yourself. And that is huge. And that's why Lotus and the idea of meditation, and this perfect, in air quotes for those of you that are not watching, this perfect seat provides us with a stable balance and directs all of that outward energy back into our bodies, in order for us to be at one, be at peace, be completely whole within ourselves, and be able to achieve these deeper states, higher states of consciousness, in an effort to bring that energy back in, focus, ground, center, be full and complete within ourselves, and then be able to move through higher states of understanding, awareness, self-love, external love, etc. So again, I'm not going to get into the breakdown of Lotus pose. What I will say is, when I get some yoga videos up, instead of going into Lotus, I will go through a Lotus prep sequence, so that people who would like to get there can begin to achieve that trajectory from a place of stability, safety, and always listening to your body, which is paramount. So with this idea of turning energy inwards towards the body, there are a few poses, a few of which are balance poses. And I always say that, again, there's no better way to get out of your head into your body than by balancing on one foot. But the idea is that the way that you put your body in these postures literally takes the energy from your body and redirects it back into the body. And so the first pose that really kind of came to me for this purpose is one of my all-time favorites. And I actually just had the pleasure of seeing a bald eagle live flying over my car yesterday evening in the frigid tundra temperatures of New Jersey that we've been living through recently. And I just, kind of started rolling slowly with the car behind me, probably wondering what I was doing, as I looked up and I said, oh no, that is definitely a bald eagle. And it's always special. I always feel like it's a sign from God or the universe when we come across, special birds and special, I'll say, moments with nature that surprise and delight us. So I had that moment yesterday, and I feel like it was a precursor for the aha moment that I had during my yoga practice this morning, which was eagle pose. Always been one of my favorites. Relatively accessible, definitely easy to modify. But in eagle pose, you're standing on one foot, either one. The opposite leg is crossed over as close to the pelvis as you can get it. So it's literally lifted and stacked over with the outside ankle. Yes, the full expression has the toe tucked behind the calf, but outside ankle pressing against the shin, which is always the safest place to be, so that you're not kind of stuck on yourself. And then the leg that is crossed over top of the standing leg, that arm is underneath, stacked at the elbows, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, elbow on elbow. And then if you can't get the backs of the hands together or come into the full grasp of fingertips to palm, you're just going to hug. So there are lots of ways to modify eagle pose. You can always stand at a wall. This one's a little tougher for that. And what I love about this is you are wrapping your entire body up in itself. So it's empowering in that, obviously, there's a balance aspect to it. You're standing on that one foot, but it's also about taking all of that balance and energy. You're almost literally mimicking kind of the idea of a strand of DNA with yourself. You are hugging in on yourself. You are drawing all of that stability and support from your body in towards the center line. And it's a true, almost like giving yourself a big hug. And the thing that I love about eagle is, while it is a balance posture, and I always say with any balance posture, you want to focus on your drishti, on your gazing point, but it is one of my favorites in that it really does bring you right in. It brings all of that energy in instead of the warriors that we talked about last sequence where you're focusing that energy by bringing it in through the ground through your body, you're sending it out. This, you're grounded through your foot, you still have that connection with the earth, but even your arms, everything is wrapped around in front of your face, directed up the line of your chakras, and you have this stability and support of interlocking your legs so that you literally become one with yourself. So if eagle is not in your practice, I encourage you to practice it safely. I encourage you to play with modifications if you don't have the flexibility or the stability to necessarily come into the full expression out of the gate. But it is one of those amazing, wonderful, really bring you back towards your center postures, which a lot of times is what yoga is all about, right? Coming back to your center. So moving on from eagle with this idea of wrapping yourself up, right? And bringing what is an external push 9 times out of 10 back within, and how important it is to make sure that you're doing that on a regular basis so that you are coming from a place of centeredness, wholeness, and completion within yourself instead of seeking and pushing for the external. So the next one that I want to talk about is definitely a little bit more accessible. It's another one of my favorites, and it is pyramid pose. I'm sure I've discussed pyramid pose in the past. It's one of my favorites, and I kind of went back and forth about whether or not downward dog or pyramid should be, and not that I say should, because again, I'm coming from a place of my own practice, my own teaching, and why I selected these poses to be a representation of bringing energy back through you. You could argue twists because you're bringing the energy wrapping around itself, but these are poses that literally bring torso and legs together, and that's one of the ways that I kind of went through it. And the arms are so important because instead of directing energy outward, like think of a chair pose where your arms are reaching forward, right? Even downward facing dog, as much as you're folding in towards yourself, or a forward fold, you're folding in towards yourself, right? These are postures and asanas. Pyramid, for example, it's essentially a warrior one, but with the front leg straight. You're hinging at your back hip creases, you're lengthening through your spine, and you're folding over that front extended leg. So this is one of my I don't like to use the word diagnose because I'm not a doctor, but it's one of my, we'll say, alert postures for people that have scoliosis or a hip instability. Hi, that's me. um, so not to quote Taylor, but the problem, the call's coming from within the house. So you'll see as soon as you have any, whether it's tight tension in the pelvis, issues with the SI joint, issues with the QL, the quadratus lumborum, tension in that pelvic area, right? That deep pelvic area. You'll see that because as soon as you have that front leg extended, the hip will come with it, and you'll have this twisted hip and torso. And some people have it and some people don't. And such is life. We do what we can. I always suggest to do a few extra breaths or stay a little bit longer on the side that carries more tension. And remember, this is a deep hamstring stretch. This puts a forward fold to shame, right? Because one leg is back and one leg is forward. So when you're in this pyramid posture, you can either have your hands on blocks and have that really long spine. I think we'll call it traditionally, again, air quotes, you can even come into reverse prayer if your shoulder has the mobility, where you take your hands behind your back, press your palms together and bring them up towards the spine with the heels of the hands touching. Don't necessarily recommend that all the time unless that's within your practice and that's just how you like to do it. It's really intense on the shoulders. And also for our purposes today, this idea of having the connection with your body back to your body, bringing that circle of energy from feet to palms back into itself. So what I like to do, it adds to the balance aspect of pyramid pose, is I like to, let's say I don't have blocks, I like to take my hands around the calf and the shin of that front extended leg. You can also, if you're checking to see if your hips have that little bit of instability or tension on one side and they're not level across the back, you can also take both hands to the lower back and sacral area and just press and start to feel in your own body whether or not you have a little bit of instability. If one hip is lifted and one hip's dropping down, and start to try to square those hips away. And with your head bowing down towards your knee, towards your front extended leg, you are able to then again have that cycle of energy moving from the tailbone, taking that energy up from the earth, coming up through the lower chakras and cycling it back into that front leg, right? Back into the body, hands on hips, back into the body, hands on the front calf, back into the body, bringing that circle of energy and directing it back to you. And I just want to make a note, one of the most important things in pyramid pose is to keep a very, very strong lift of the kneecap of the front leg, both legs in theory. But anytime that you are lengthening, especially aggressively, because pyramid is a pretty aggressive pose when it comes to that hamstring of the front leg, make sure that you are engaging the quad of that same leg. Lift the kneecap, make sure the knee feels stable. Don't hyperextend. Keep a little micro bend in that knee, a little buoyancy in the knee. Don't lock it out. That's not what we're here for. And then also make sure that, if it's a little bit too much for you to have your hands not on blocks as you need the extra stability, then having that long spine and having your hands on blocks with a long back as opposed to a rounded back over that extended leg is totally acceptable. Make sure that you are drawing your lower abdominals in to support the lower back. If you're not in the deep fold and you are keeping that lower back secure, stable, balanced, and as even as your body will allow as you start to, again, understand, feel, and see where you are in space. The next one, and I'm going to preface this because I can't not reference this posture. They always say the pose that you avoid the most is the pose that you need the most. And I will say that I know this is that one for me. So I will raise my hand and say that I am guilty of it as much as anybody else is. And I will hold nobody to shame for, maybe running away from some of those postures that are just brutal for ourselves. And this one for me is a bit contraindicated. So when I practice, I am very, very careful. But plow pose, halasana. And there are a couple different modifications. I've heard it called candle pose. I've heard there's a couple different options, but essentially plow pose, disclaimer again, plow pose is a deep bend at the shoulders, and it can have detrimental effects on the cervical spine, your neck. And as someone with a neck injury, I need to preface by saying, if you're going to practice this posture, I advise you to do so under the qualified care of a professional. If you have it in your practice and this is something that you're comfortable with, I'm going to tell you, always use the blanket prop and make sure that the top of the folded correctly yoga blanket is at your shoulders so that you're giving a little bit of extra space and you're not dumping all of the weight of your hips and legs onto your cervical vertebrae. You do not want to do that. When we come into plow pose, I always recommend setting yourself up so that your feet, when they come up over the head, so essentially, and I'm going to use my hands, but essentially you're laying down, you begin with your head facing the wall and the blanket propped under your shoulders, and then you don't kick, but you begin to come into a modified bridge. You can even use a bolster or a block under your hips, and then you start to reach one leg up and back, and you reach the toes for the wall behind you and over your head so that you're coming into this supported. It's a prep for shoulder stand as well. So you are putting a lot of pressure on your shoulders and on that area of your neck. So again, I say this because of the point that it is relevant and it's a beautiful posture and it is wonderful for the lower back and wonderful for the hamstrings. And it does redirect that energy, especially in the candle version or in the version that allows the knees to then drop on either side of the ears. But again, It's not the same pose. It's just that they're very similar, especially in setup. And frankly, a lot of times people will come from one into the other. So I caution away from shoulder stand because similar to downward facing dog, while it's close, it is not the point. But with plow, you are supporting the middle back with the hand. So you kind of take your thumbs at the bra line, elbows roll underneath, similar to how you would set up for bridge. And a lot of times you'll set up for bridge first, and then you'll kind of start to walk the hands around, get the elbows underneath you, support the middle back, and then you start to bring one knee up into the body and extend the leg. And then you're touching your legs, or my arms right now, coming up over the head. And that's why I say do that with a wall behind you, so that you can keep bent knees, because you want to have full control to protect the neck, and then begin to walk your feet towards the floor until you're at a point, and you'll have to play with the length of your legs, the length of your torso, and the proximity to the wall in an effort to be able to get to that point where your legs do come straight. So if this is my legs, this is my hips, you're supporting your own body, and then you start to bring your feet towards the floor and you're in a shoulder stand position. You don't want to have the weight on the neck. You don't want to have the weight on the neck. I can't emphasize that enough. So when I say this, again, please keep in mind, much like lotus, plow pose is a wonderful posture. It is used as a prep for shoulder stand. It is used to lengthen through the lumbar spine, lengthen through the hamstrings, stabilize the hips, strengthen the core, right? Strengthening your core, strengthening the arms as you're supporting the body. And again, that direction of energy from the chakras, having that inversion, right? Because it is an inversion as well. Having that inversion come up and having the legs, again, redirect back towards the floor, back towards the crown of the head, depending on the proximity and length of your legs. And then a lot of times what people will do is they'll bend the knees and they'll allow the knees to come with their hips up, again, stacked in that shoulder stand position. So you're kind of, as for people with healthy necks, you are putting a lot of pressure right at the tops of the shoulders, and the neck is bent. So that may be contraindicated for you across the board, and maybe you shouldn't do it. Like I said, when I do it, I'm very, very careful. I have a decent idea of what I'm doing after so many years. But even with all of the best intentions, all of the yoga practice in the world, you can tweak something. If you have an injury, you never know. So please, please, please be mindful, be careful. Don't try this at home, kids, right? Make sure you're trying this with a qualified professional to keep an eye on you. I'm happy to help you if you need it. But again, this is one that once you drop the knees around the ears and you bend and you release out of the posture, you get that, you walk away from the extension of the legs, which is kind of the active aspect of the pose, and you kind of sink down into the softness of a slightly different pose or a variation of plow. And then as you come out of it, again, with your hands supporting, you gently roll the spine back down slowly back into your bridge. If your legs are extended, you can bring one leg down at a time, support, and slowly roll the spine down. Fish pose is a wonderful, traditional, and acceptable counter pose for anytime you do plow or shoulder stand work. And then there are two, and I'm going to mention them both. So again, for this idea of you could go with forward fold, but for me, and I'm going to give two options for the final, well, second to final. There's one more that I'm going to throw in at the end. But the second to final option for this, redirect the energy back into yourself. And the first one is the harder one. It's the standing asana. Hand to big toe pose, right? So that is where you are standing on one leg, you have the opposite leg extended, and you are grabbing your big toe or the bottom of the ball of your foot with both hands. And it is a balance pose. It is a challenging balance pose. You want to have the leg extended, foot flexed. Again, same thing as that pyramid posture. Quad is strong on the extended leg. You're not hyperextending that knee, and you're folding over. Why do I like this? Well, let's see. So similarly to eagle, you are standing on that grounded leg, right? And you have this drawing of energy up through the ground, meeting at the pelvis at the base of the chakras, and then going up through the chakra system, circling back into the foot that you're holding, right? And if this is not in your practice, and the reason I said there are two is because the other option is going to be to do this as head to knee pose. And revolved head to knee pose works too, but because of this idea of cycling the energy instead of sideways or laterally with revolved head to knee pose where is also a great lotus prep. So bringing it all full circle, having sitting in your comfortable upright seat, hips behind you slightly, one leg extended out with a flexed foot, and the opposite leg drawing in, externally rotating so the sole of that foot presses into the inner thigh. Think a seated version of tree pose, and then you're folding over and reaching for the extended leg foot. And obviously, for all of these postures, if you do them on one side, do them on the other side for balance and equanimity. When it comes to your pyramid, to your eagle, to your hand to big toe, to your head to knee pose, with the exception of your static poses such as plow, where there's no other side, it's just the one. And similarly to plow, and the one that I said I was going to throw in at the very end is child's pose. You can't not throw in child's pose when you're talking about redirecting energy inward. It is the ultimate rest pose other than Shavasana, which as much as I love Shavasana, it's all about coming inward. It's all palms open, toes out to the side relaxation. Child's pose is there you can have the forehead resting on the floor. You can be grabbing the soles of your feet with your arms behind you. You can have your arms outstretched. You can bring your hands together. You can have your knees wide. Your hips are on your heels. There's so much connection between your body, your palms, the big toes, the thighs and the calves, the compression of the legs and the torso. There's so many different ways in child's pose that you are able to bring yourself back to yourself. And that is what this conversation that we're having is all about today, is coming back to yourself, redirecting that energy back to yourself, making sure that you are coming from a whole, centered, grounded, I am complete within myself space before you go out into the outside world and focus on all of the external things that we need to do in our third dimensional existence. But remember that anytime you choose yourself, anytime you choose to acknowledge your own energy, acknowledge your own power, and bring it back in instead of pushing it out. Instead of even the aspect of me having this conversation right now, this creation is an external energy output. And so with the amount that we push out into the outside world, for as beautiful as it may be, when you're taking care of your children, when you're walking your dog, when you're breathing, right? All of these things are beautiful, wonderful things, but it doesn't bring the energy back in. So I encourage you to do that. And no matter whether you put your palms together in prayer, that's probably the easiest, most simple way to do this, right? And I actually said this to a friend of mine who is having a moment in a work setting. And I said, listen, and I can't take credit for this because I've seen this elsewhere, but all of us know to come here. But if you're really, really feeling it, you're really feeling a moment and you just press in, or you can always bring your hands to your heart. That's a big one for me. I always bring my hands to my heart, or I bring my hands to my solar plexus. This is just as you go about your day, if you're having a moment, right? You can come into yoga mudras, bring that energy that comes out of the hands back to the hands. You can bring the hands to the heart. You can bring the hands to the solar plexus. You can take your hands onto your thighs. You can take your hands onto your temples, bringing that energy back to you, even for a moment, coming back to your breath, breathing into your hands, coming back to yourself for a moment. And just this little practice, even if you do it randomly, when you're sitting in traffic and you're, mad at the world, right? Just one hand on the wheel, right? Maybe one hand on your heart. And anytime that you're having a moment or that you're feeling overwhelmed, frazzled, out of your body, into your head, right? Drop back in, check in with yourself. If you don't have time to come into a full lotus pose, which again, I don't encourage you do without the proper support and help, come back, bring yourself back into your body, bring yourself back into the present moment. Remember that as much energy as you have to project the power within you, you can project it back to yourself too. And that is probably one of the best, most benevolent uses of your power. We're not talking about being selfish, we're talking about self love. And that is where that power of conscious redirection of your own energy back within you, like recharging your own battery, be your own power charger, be your own bank, and take yourself with you. And if you need a quick one, hands on the heart, palms together. If you have time to do a yoga practice, like I said, head to knee, very, very safe, easy to do. Pyramid, a little bit more strenuous, pretty accessible. Even tree pose. I know we didn't touch on it too much, because I prefer eagle, but work with eagle. Take a few moments, take a few breaths. Remember to do each side. And if you have a side that's a little stickier, do it twice or take a few extra breaths there. And so I always reminding you to take care of yourself first. Put your own, what do they say on the planes? Put your own air mask on first, right? Redirect that energy to yourself and make sure that you are doing that on a regular basis so that you can be there for the world around you, the ones that need you, and be the best, most shining, brightest version of yourself that you can be, because you know that you're centered, whole, and complete, and that everything that you have and everything that you need is already within you. So just remind yourself of that. And as always, letting you know how much I appreciate each and every one of you for sharing your space with me, and asking that you please feel free to do the same and share this space with your loved ones. For more goodness, follow me on all the socials at Above the Ground Podcast, and check out my website, airsAboveYoga.com. As always, don't forget to check out my other episodes and all of my amazing sisters at Divas That Care Network. You can find us on Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else that you feel guided, including YouTube. Again, this is Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground Podcast, where every day is a good one.